I think in football, there's always a point in a team's development when the iron is hot and it's time to strike. I think it's always like that, right? Liverpool, I think of 1819, 1920. That team was Liverpool at its apex. They had match winners and potential all-timers in so many different positions. And yes, they were competing against a crazy force of nature in that Manchester City team, but they struck when the iron was hot, clinched the Champions League, won the league the next season, made the signings that they had to, maximize that squad to the best of their abilities. That's just one example, right? But I feel in football, it's often true. And then when you kind of strike that moment, it's up to you then to kind of maintain that level and add when you have to and remove players when they're kind of reaching the end of their peak. That's how you kind of stay at the top. But getting at the top and striking when the iron is hot, I truly believe is massively important. And when I look at this Arsenal team, right, I think they might have missed their moment. At least under Arteta, I think they might have missed their moment. Now, I don't want to be too rash in what I'm saying here because there's still 28 games of football left for them to play. The season is not over. But I'm watching this Arsenal team right now, and things have gone stale. That I'm not afraid to say. Things have massively gone stale. To the point that I think they might have regressed. I think they've regressed from last season and the season prior. You look at that 22-23 season, right? A year where I don't think anyone expected Arsenal to go as far in the title race as they did. 50 points after 19 games. They were irresistible. But when I look at how that season unfolded for them, the injury to William Saliba towards the end, the massacre against City at the Etihad, the 4-1, I feel like the ending to that season, rather than encourage Arteta to continue going in the direction that they were, almost scarred him a little, almost scorned him. And from that moment on, Arsenal for me have just become more and more and more pragmatic and more and more and more reactive and incredibly good defensively. So good. For me, I keep saying it, I still think they're the best defensive team in the world. But you look at the flip side of that. Have they gone too far left or too far right, rather? Yes, that 2022-23 team wasn't perfect. I don't think anybody would be fooled into thinking that. But have they gone too far in the other extreme now? People were getting onto Carragher when he was saying Arteta is more Mourinho than he is Pep Guardiola, but was he that wrong in saying that? I'm looking at this Arsenal team, right? And I genuinely do not recognize Arsenal in them. And that's not to say that, look, that team that Wenger built towards the second half of the 2000s and the early 2010s was a perfect team. It wasn't. Defensively, those guys were a joke. But still, the element of play in that Arsenal are always entertaining, and Arsenal have match winners, and Arsenal have geniuses and mavericks on the pitch that can flip a game. Like that is no longer recognizable in this team. Let's make that very, very clear. I've said, if I haven't said it a million times, this is the millionth and 1st time. This team doesn't have enough match winners in it. It genuinely doesn't. It was obvious to me last season, particularly in Europe, where I always say for me, X Factor and match winners are the most important. And then when I looked at the window that they had to go for Calafiori, Merino, and Sterling, when match winning ability was that clear, that obvious a flaw in this team, is a massive failure from the board. It's a massive failure from Arteta. It's a massive failure from ownership. It's just not good enough. Genuinely, to have the season you did, where you were so close to winning the league. You lost to a Bayern Munich team that ultimately over a season weren't as good as you, but in those small moments where you need a bit of brilliance, they overcame you. The response to that season was signing Mikel Merino, Ricardo Calafiori, and Raheem Sterling. And that's nothing against any of them as players. That's not to say they were bad players. But that's not good enough to take the next step. That's not good enough to get over the line. Let's be real here, guys. Come on. Let's leave it all out on the line here, man. Arsenal are a very good team, but you are not winning the league with that kind of window. It's not happening. Not with the flaws that they already had. I've looked at the game against Newcastle today, right? And genuinely, after 90 minutes, I don't think Newcastle ever felt really at risk of conceding. Maybe towards the end with that Saka cross to the back post, I think for Declan Rice. Outside of that, Newcastle were comfy. They were comfy, and this isn't a vintage Newcastle team. This isn't a great Newcastle team. And in fact, I want to talk about Newcastle a little later in the video, but it's a team that struggled, right? This season hasn't been great for them. I think they were winless in 5 before today, and yet they were so comfy, honestly. And it's getting to the point with Arsenal now where I'm watching them, and if a goal isn't coming out of a moment of brilliance from Bukayo Saka, whether it's him cutting in and shooting, whether it's him ripping his fullback, whether it's him putting the ball on a play for somebody, if the goal isn't coming from that, or a goal isn't coming from a set piece, which Arsenal have made themselves extremely effective from this season, I don't know where the goals are coming from. And yes, you can say a large part of that is due to the fact that Odegaard is out. And I hear it. I completely agree. But that's an issue there. The fact that your team is that reliant on Odegaard and Saka that if even one of them, forget about two, one of them is out, the creativity, the match-winning capabilities, the chance creation, it's nowhere to be seen. It's nowhere to be seen. I look at the team that Arteta's put out there today. Declan Rice and Marino in midfield. Saka and Martinelli on either side. Havertz and Trossard up front. Like, come on, man. Forget about individually, because I think Saka's brilliant. But as a unit, on average, that front six, if you want to call it that, again, I'm trying to keep it respectful here, man. But that's not great. That's not a great front six in total. Like I said, Saka, very, very good. As a unit, that front six is genuinely just normal. It's a normal front six. I look at the next two games that they have coming up. Away to Inter in the Champions League. Tough game. Tough game. And then away to Chelsea at Stamford Bridge on Sunday. Or next weekend. Let's be real here. Arsenal's season rests in the balance of this week. It does. You lose to Chelsea next weekend, that's it. Already, some people might be going quick to say it's already over, and it might just well be. But I'll give you guys the benefit of the doubt. You lose to Chelsea next weekend, Arsenal's season in terms of challenging for the title, it's done. It's done. They're already going to be potentially 8 points behind Manchester City by the end of this weekend. Liverpool as well. They are flying at the moment. You lose to Chelsea next weekend, it's over. I'm sorry. Like, yes, you might still get mid 80 points. Yes, you might be a few 5 points behind City by the end of the season. But realistically, the hope that you have of winning the league is done next weekend if you lose to Chelsea. And not just that, right? I'm looking at Arteta. And this isn't me saying sack Arteta per se. This isn't me saying Arteta out. This isn't me saying Arsenal need to get a new manager. It's not me saying that. But a project and a process is only as good as the improvements that you make. Ideally, you want to be improving year after year after year. And full credit to Arteta, since he's come in, that is what Arsenal for the most part have done. Season after season after season after season, the improvement is there. It's tangible. It's visible. And Arsenal fans have left every single season feeling, yeah, we're on the right track. I think we're getting to a point now for the first time in Arteta's tenure, really, where the worry might be we're not on the right track. We are not improving at the necessary trajectory that we need to. And in fact, I truly believe at the minimum, they've stagnated from last season. Dare I say it, they might have regressed. And as a manager, that's concerning because Arsenal fans will have backed Arteta to the hills. Arsenal fans will have believed that he's the best man to take this team to the promised land. He's the best man to lead this team to titles, to major silverware. But we are dangerously close, in my opinion, to, for the first time in Arteta's tenure at Arsenal, I think fans looking at it and saying, has he taken us as far as we can get? Are his limitations, are his, at times, cowardice, I would say, in terms of how he sets up his team to play, are they eventually going to put a ceiling on this team? And give him credit because he's built the foundation to this team. He's, in fact, broken ceilings to get this team where they are. But is he personally reaching a ceiling of this team? I think it's a major concern. I look at this game genuinely, chat. It's a team devoid of ideas. It's a team that over 90 minutes have barely laid a glove on, let's be real, an average Newcastle team. It's not a vintage Newcastle team. It's not the Newcastle of a few seasons ago. And I get it. St. James's Park is a tough place to go. It is. City drew earlier in the season. I get it. But it's not the result per se. It's the manner of the performance that is extremely concerning if you're an Arsenal fan. It's extremely concerning. I'm looking at this team, and for me, this is not Arsenal. And here's the thing, right? There's nothing wrong with being pragmatic at all. Let me make that very clear. To win, there's numerous ways to skin a cat. I always say that. So Arteta not being Arsene Wenger, Arteta not playing Arsenal like the old Arsenal, that's not an issue unless it's not leading to success. Because here's the thing, right? Teams have won silverware being pragmatic. I think of Jose Mourinho's Chelsea. I think of Thomas Tuchel's Chelsea. I think of Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid. There's not an issue with being a pragmatic side, but you have to win. That's the thing, right? Like, it's okay not to be the most entertaining. It's okay to not be the team that wows every single rival. That's perfectly fine. Football is not about impressing your rivals. It's about winning, but you have to win. And even Arsenal fans, right? At some point, this football will start to get frustrating for them if the silverware isn't the ultimate reward for it. It's what I always used to say about Conte at Spurs. Yeah, he's winning short term. Yes, the football is awful, but it's only worth it, the football being awful, if there's that silverware at the end of the line. That's what it is with Antonio Conte. I always say you're almost selling your footballing soul for the ultimate gain of titles at the end. But if you don't get the title at the end, you don't get the trophy at the end, you're just watching shit football for 38 games a season, and there's nothing at the end of the road. I'm not going to say Arteta's Antonio Conte here, but the manner in which Arsenal are playing games, like I said, the last few seasons, it hasn't been like that. This is now an extreme that I don't think we've seen from Arteta and Arsenal. and it won't be worth it after 38 games if there's nothing to show for it. At the current moment, I have to say, I don't think there will be anything to show for it. I don't see Arsenal winning this league. Not the way Manchester City are currently constructed. Man City, I come out of games, chat. I record on YouTube, right? Their fans, they must get sick of me, but I always say, look at the City team. I don't think they're at their final form yet. They're conceding crazy, silly chances. They're not really exerting their wrath on teams like I've seen the best version of City do. And yet, with all that being said, they're still top of the league. They're still undefeated in Europe. I look at this Liverpool team. Yeah, you can say, look, they haven't played that many elite caliber teams, but they look a hell of a lot more convincing, even against the mid-table ones, than Arsenal do at the moment. I don't see Arsenal winning the league this season. I don't. That's not to say that they're going to finish outside the top 4. They're going to finish 30. I'm not saying all that. But winning the league, I don't see it for them this year. And in the Champions League, the European knockout competition, I'm yet to be convinced by this side. So therefore, Arsenal fans, another season where you finish without a title, without major European silverware. I don't know what you guys do in the Carabao Cup or the FA Cup. But not just that, the trajectory of this project almost seeming to kind of stagnate a little. How do you feel after 38 games? I'm not asking you to predict the future, but put yourself in a hypothetical situation. 38 games over. Are you content with how this season went? Is that a success of a season or ultimately a failure? Because I wouldn't have called last season a failure. I think you progressed. I think you improved. I definitely wouldn't have called the season before a failure. Not winning silverware is not the issue, but you still have to have that trajectory that continues pointing at a brighter future. The way it's happening right now, the way it's going down right now, the way you guys are playing right now, that trajectory for me has hit a ceiling. And I look at this week. This is potentially the biggest week of Mikel Arteta's Arsenal career. Failure to beat Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Boy, I think uncomfortable conversations are going to get started. But hey, I'm just watching, man. I look at Newcastle, though. I want to give them a big shout out because when I look at this team, right, it's weird to me how lackluster and how poor they've kind of been. This season in particular. Last year, I think you could attribute a lot of that to injuries. But this season, I'm watching them and I'm like, sometimes the performances aren't even great. Forget about the results, but the results in total, they are not impressive whatsoever either. Like they're 5 games winless before this in the Premier League. They're kind of floating around mid-table at the moment. But I look at their squad and they have quality players. Bruno Guimaraes, for me, is a top midfielder. He goes to a lot of big teams and improves them. Alexander Isak, man, if I'm an Arsenal fan, I'm watching Newcastle today, I'm thinking, why is that guy playing for Newcastle and not for Arsenal? He's that caliber of center forward. He should be competing in the Champions League, competing for league titles every single season. He took his goal today exceptionally well. First of all, kind of playing the ball out wide, getting himself in a brilliant goal-scoring position in between Saliba and Gabriel. And the header, it's emphatic. I look at Anthony Gordon. Oh, man, this guy must be a coach's dream. He never stops running. He never stops chasing back. He never stops being direct and trying to attack his fullback, puts dangerous balls into the box, goes to goal. I absolutely love the guy. I look at the fullback partnership that Newcastle have in Livramento and Hall. That's a very, very good young fullback pairing right there. Tonali comes on. I thought Tonali had a really good cameo. But then I look at this Newcastle team. Everything I'm saying points to a team that should be competing for the top 4 or at minimum competing for Europa League places. But I don't know what's happened since that year that Eddie Howe kind of led them to the Champions League. But for me, this is again a team that has stagnated. It has gone a little stale at St. James's Park. So performances like today and results like today should be expected. And yes, for me, I always say it, going to Newcastle away is one of the toughest places to go as a Premier League team. But I just think sustainably, like consistently, they have to give teams way more problems than they have this year, because you've seen it now against City, you've seen it against Arsenal. I'm looking at Liverpool. I think they're going to struggle when they go to St. James's Park. I look at my team United. I think they're going to struggle. But why can't you kind of extend that over 38 games? It's a little bit of a puzzling one for me. But regardless, great victory for Newcastle. I think it buys Eddie Howe a lot of time as well too. And as for Arsenal, I know you guys are going to be watching City. I know you guys are going to be watching Liverpool, praying for a result to go your way. Because genuinely, you guys are crawling, like grasping. You know, like, what's that scene from The Lion King where the dad, I can't remember his name, man. I sound dumb as hell, right? Was it Mustafa? Is Mustafa the dad? Yeah, I think it's Mustafa, right? And he's clawing to stay on the mountain. And Scar is Man City and Liverpool right now. He's just looking at them like, I might just have to flick my claw out at you and make you fall. That's what it looks like for Arsenal right now. They are grasping to stay in this league title. I'm not convinced.